Thanks for joining us today. This is our webinar called Funding Beyond Federal, How to Diversify Funding and Ensure Stability in Uncertain Times. And this is a new webinar that we put together. We've put together a lot of great resources for you that hopefully will help you out. So I just want to go over some of the logistics before we get started. Thanks for sharing where you're joining from. I want to welcome you. I'm Dave Holmes. I'm the Educational Programming Manager for Candid out of our Cleveland office. And I'm joined today by Tracy Kaufman. Tracy?
Hi, I'm Tracy Kaufman. I am the Educational Programming Manager based out of New York.
And backing everybody up behind the scenes are a number of Candid staff members, but led by Carla Norris. Carla, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm going to be behind the scenes answering some questions. And as Dave mentioned, a few of our colleagues are here today too, because we do anticipate there might be a lot of questions and comments today. So thank you all. Really looking forward to today's discussion. And yeah, we're here if you need anything. Thank you.
If you don't know who we are Candid. Candid started 6 years ago. It's the combination of two other organizations, Foundation Center, which has been around since the 50s, collecting information on the world of philanthropy and foundation giving. We combined 6 years ago with GuideStar. GuideStar had been around since the 70s, collecting information on all the nonprofits in the United States. All 1.9 million of them are listed on guidestar.org. Both of these, the content from both organizations, Foundation Center and GuideStar, are now part of Candid.org. And if you don't know Candid, you should take a look at our website, Candid.org. We have much free information about how the nonprofit world works, where money comes from, where it's going, a lot of the changes that are going on. We'll be sharing a lot of our resources with you today, but there's many more to use, so we hope that you will take advantage of that. Also, you may want to pay a visit to one of our partners, and we'll talk about those later. This is about the training that we're doing here, and we understand that we're setting a kind of a big bar with, funding beyond federal, everything that you might need to know. We're not going to be able to tell you everything. We're not going to be able to change your organization for you. But what we want to make sure that you get out of this is the difference between government grants and other alternative funding streams you can use. And we're going to give you as many practical steps to pursue foundation, corporation, and individual giving as we can, along with some resources to help you create an action plan for what you need to do. We hope that you get out of this at least some resources that you can take back to your organization, work with your staff and board, and come out with a nice, suitable plan for what you're going to do to deal with the moment, to meet the moment. That's really what we're about here today. And so I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to stop sharing my slides and let Tracy Kaufman begin to share her slides.
Thank you. Just one moment. And here we are. All right. So, how's everybody doing? Like, for real. How's everybody doing? Yeah, we can't see you, we can't hear you, but like we can kind of hear you through the chat. But like I asked because I assume we're all here for a reason. And I don't think that reason is because you're all secret admirers of me and Dave and Carla. I think you're here because you're having some funding issues, either right now or on the horizon, and we're gonna have to do something about it. So, long story short, nonprofits are obviously being impacted in a major way by this freezing of federal funding. And we have to figure out what we're all collectively going to do about it. And I think like there's this unspoken question of, is this forever? And like, is this situation with this lack of federal funding that was such a big part of how so many of us kept afloat to be able to do our work? Like, is this situation going to be a problem for what, a year? For 4 years? Longer than 4 years? We don't know. Who knows? But whatever the situation, we all have to find a way to get through this together. And so, like, under the circumstances, really the philanthropic environment of how we support ourselves, it's evolving. Whether that's a temporary evolution or whether this is going to be a change that's going to have lasting effects for who knows, many years to come. But like, how are we going to adapt to this situation? How are we going to survive? And how are we going to do more than survive? Find kind of resilience and sustainability here so that we can keep showing up and doing what we need to do. And figuring out how are we going to plan for our future and be confident that we're gonna have a future. So Dave and I are gonna cover some things that you can do to hopefully get through all of this, while also accepting the fact that like federal funding was a big player for a lot of people in the sector. And other streams of funding can't necessarily fully or immediately replace federal funding. But we have plans, we have ideas, we have resources, and we can help you think about how you're going to get through this in the short term, maybe in the long term, and overall gain a bit of sustainability. So, that in mind, you want to see some numbers? You want to see the full extent of the situation right now? Let's get real depressing for a moment, and then we'll get a lot more optimistic. Okay. So we're talking about like roughly $303 billion annually. That is what we're saying with federal funding, over $300 million. This map here is showing you kind of a breakdown state by state, what percentage of nonprofits in different states receive federal money. Do we have anyone here from Vermont or Alaska or West Virginia? Anybody? Because if you're from any one of those three states, you have been hit especially hard. I think those are the states where the most nonprofits receive federal funding. But all 50 states here, they're all receiving an impact here. So what Candid has found in the data available to us, which is basically IRS data, we found that 30% roughly of 990 filers receive government grants. And so that is over 100,000 nonprofits, as far as we can tell with the limits of our data, who are getting this government money. Let's look a little further. And who's getting federal funding? It really just it varies a bit depending on your issue area and depending on your overall budget size here. And so what we're seeing in this chart here is that like small nonprofits do receive federal funding, but the bigger you are, the more likely you are to be reliant on federal funding. Like it says here, like while 30% of US nonprofits, from what we can tell, are receiving government grants, over half of organizations with budgets over 5 million receive at least one government grant. And a lot of this is because larger nonprofits tend to be more likely to have the capacity for the intense process of what it takes to go through like getting access to government funding. For those of you who have dealt with this, like it's an ordeal dealing with 100-page grant applications, crazy levels of compliance issues. Some organizations have a person whose entire job is just doing compliance for a grant. Anyway, I don't know if anyone here has seen the bridge span research that they've done over the years on like how nonprofits get really big. They did this research back in 2007 and they repeated it again last year in 2024. with so many people on the line, I'm sure at least someone has seen this information before. But what Bridgespan found was that the nonprofits who get really, really large budget-wise, and by large, I think they mean like at least like 50 million a year, something like that. Those really large organizations, they defied the kind of common wisdom that's given out about how, oh, you should diversify your funding. You should make sure that your funding is coming from a variety of different places. You protect yourself better that way. And that the really large organizations did the total opposite. They went in hard on just one funding stream, and it helped them grow immensely to huge sizes. And the most common funding stream that helped nonprofits get large, often at a pretty quick clip, was government funding. And now nowhere in that research, I think, did it go into, yeah, but is this necessarily a healthy thing or a sustainable thing? And I'm kind of wondering, those organizations that did succeed in like really scaling up, getting to be huge organizations, what are they going through right now? It's a scary situation at the moment. So we said about 30% of 990 filers get government funding. About a third of nonprofit government grantees, which is about 35,000 organizations, get more than half of their revenue from the government. So working it out, I think that makes it like about 10% of 990 filers get over half of their revenue from government funding. And that's not nothing. And this is all keeping in mind there are limits to how much we can suss out through our data. Like this information that you see here, this doesn't even include government contracts. This doesn't include loans. This also doesn't include the nonprofits who do not file a 990, which is a bunch of them. So if anything, we are underestimating the impact of these government funding cuts. To shed a little extra light on the situation, the Urban Institute also collects a lot of data on this kind of stuff. And while we pull our information from like the IRS, from 990s, they did a study where they found overall 2/3 of public charities get either government grants or contracts. It's a lot. And also about 79% of organizations with a budget over $1 million get at least one government grant or contract. And of all those organizations, the majority are going to face a deficit without that funding. Certain fields being more vulnerable than others. Human services, about like over 70%, are expected to face a deficit with those kind of cuts. Health organizations, education organizations. So on that note, let's also see from our data, a chart kind of going into the effects depending on what subject area you're in. So maybe take a look at this and see where do you fall in all of this. So here we see, here's human services. Human services is really kind of one of the types of organizations bearing the brunt of a lot of this. The international organizations, foreign affairs, also in a really tough spot. Education, not great. Everyone, though, is going to be impacted in some way or another. But I will say human services is really in a tough position in that 40% of the government grantees in human services say that government funding makes up their primary revenue stream. So this is tough. And here, I think, it's kind of the hardest slide of all here. I have all the really cheery information for you. Took a really great piece of this class, didn't I? All right, so we created a dashboard at Candid, not we, like me and Dave, but people at Candid created a dashboard to kind of show the cash runway of organizations when it comes to this government funding, to kind of ask, all right, nonprofits that lose their government grants, if nothing else changes without either getting some new funding of some type or cutting their expenses, how long will they be able to stay afloat? And so this chart you're seeing here is showing that if they've lost government grants and they're not either making up that funding somewhere else or cutting their expenses, about 1/5 of these nonprofits will run out of money in 3 months. 3 months! And almost a third will run out by the time we've hit 6 months. Like, it's crazy. And that also means, like, that's potentially like 4 million nonprofit employees who could be out of work as well. 4 million, which is like the equivalent of the population of like the city of Los Angeles. Imagine the entire city of Los Angeles became unemployed right now. Like, these are dramatic numbers. And so you're probably all feeling really depressed right now. We've cooked up some ennui in the room, I think. But we're going to try to help you out today. So the thing is, in the midst of all of this, like, who better than us nonprofits to find a way through this? Like, I think a lot of us have been underestimated for years. And the value of the work that we do, that we provide to society, has been underestimated for years. And we have done incredible things on a shoestring budget for years. And there's a secret power in being underestimated. If you haven't found proof of that, you will. When people underestimate you, you can quietly achieve some pretty impressive things. So I think we have been practicing for this situation all our lives. And really, like, what are we gonna do as a society? Say that, oh, we don't need to fund, like, we don't need shelters, we don't need food banks, we don't need medical research. Who needs to throw money out there to support those things? No, we need those things as a society to function. The work that everyone in this room does is important, and we're gonna figure it out. So that is what we're gonna go into today. What are some ideas that we can cook up about how to figure this out? So with that in mind, out of curiosity to see where everybody is at, we have a poll. And the poll is, what percentage of your organization's budget relies on government grants? Let's take a moment and see. My heart goes out to those of you who might be answering 75% or more. Oops. It's like a little over half the room has answered. Give you another moment or two. Let's get at least to 2/3, if not higher. No one knows how you're answering. It's anonymous. Okay. 68%. Can we hit 70? Going once.
Let's see, Tracy, to interrupt, someone was asking if we mean federal, state, lost the thread here. Federal, state, or local grants. So is this including all of those?
We're talking about all
Okay.
grants, all governmental grants,
Yeah.
federal, state, and local.
Because I think if you're relying on state and local, you're going to be impacted as well sooner or later. Like, this is a major issue. All right. I think we've got pretty good participation here. Okay. So it looks like the largest share of you, fortunately, doesn't have this as the majority of your revenue. 42% of you say 25% or less of your budget is government grants. And then we're most kind of evenly split amongst the others with like 25 to 50, 50 to 75%. 18% of you say that 75% or more of your budget is government grants. So you're going to have a bit of work to do. And I hope that we can help you. So thank you for your generosity in sharing that information. Another opportunity to share a little something. All right, we can hear you through the chat, even if we can't hear your voices out loud. So share out one word to describe how this funding environment feels for you.
Or one reaction to, if you.
Or one reaction. If you want to make use of emojis, emojis are always welcome. See a lot of those surprised Pikachu faces in those reactions. What do we got here? Frustrating, confusing, dire, idiotic, cruel, catastrophic. All right. Okay. Difficult and uncertain. Like the pandemic was child's play. Yeah, we thought everything was going to be a lot smoother once things started to even out in the pandemic a little bit. And it's always something, isn't it? Okay. It's a good opportunity to vent and just get it out. All right, forward looking, stepping out in faith. Those are some slightly more hopeful responses here. Maybe let's try to lean into the most hopeful angles of our difficult feelings right now and see how we can leverage those towards making something of this moment. So with that, I do believe I'm turning it back over to Dave to kind of give a little idea of what the landscape is like in terms of charitable giving.
All right. So thank you, Tracy. And I'm going to bring my slides back up here and begin to talk about some of the things that we can do in this situation. And some of the responses on the chat were right in that, knowing about it and knowing what is possible and what bad things might happen is important so that you can know that this is definitely a situation where you need to respond. But what's better is knowing, first of all, where you are, and then second of all, what you can do. So what we're going to try to do throughout the rest of the presentation is offer you some ideas, some resources that can help you out, and hopefully give you some tools that you can use to move forward with this. We don't know, we can't think about each of your individual situations. We don't have the time to kind of do a one-on-one consulting with everybody, but we do want to make sure that you understand the universe that you're living in. We have more stats about where nonprofit sources of revenue comes from. And this is from the Health of the Nonprofit Sector report from Independent Sector. And it shows probably the most complete picture of where all the different sources of funding for nonprofits come, including earned income, including government funding. And this doesn't mean that this is your organization. This just means this is the picture of the entire nonprofit sector as reported with the independent sector study. When we get down to this, we often share this slide, which shows if you were thinking just about donated materials and donated grants, that most of the money comes from individuals, foundations, corporations. That kind of element breaks out in this way, where a lot of the funding is coming from individuals. But really, the picture of where money can come from to support your organization, we talk about diversification of funding all the time in our introductory classes. We talk about the fact that there isn't one right picture for every organization. So just so that you know, I mean, there's foundation grants, there's corporate funding. We're going to talk about those two in detail. We're going to talk about individual giving, but also thinking about in-kind donations, pro bono support of services, donor advised funds, additional kind of an individual gift that you're able to get in front of, earned income, selling memberships, doing crowdfunding or peer-to-peer fundraising, events. There's all sorts of different ways that you can diversify your funding. And what you have to think about is if you're relying very heavily on one federal source and that federal source is cut, for example, it's unlikely that one organization, one foundation, one corporation is going to step up and replace that. And we've done some studies in our Candid Insights blog. Our data team has looked and seen, it would be an immense increase in the amount of foundation funding for it to kind of come up and replace. It's just not feasible. It's just not possible for foundations to do that. So we have to look and see what are the other ways that you can find to replace maybe the balance that you have for your organization. So think about the options. And this is something that we know that this is something that you are kind of, your mind is racing when you're dealing with a situation where funding is changing. But think about it more systematically. Think about who you have to help with this. We're talking about your staff members and your board members, but your volunteers, any donors that you already have. One of the first bits of advice I gave people when some of these announcements were being made in January and February were make sure every one of your current donors knows your situation. Like people that you've collaborated with, foundations that have funded you, if they don't know what's happening and what's changing in your organization, they're not going to be able to help you respond to it. So, who are your current funders? Who could be giving more? Who have you made connections with but not really explored? And what additional streams could you add to your funding mix? Thinking about it in terms of time and money is essential to this because every bit of fundraising, and those of you who get lots of federal funding will know this, that there's an awful lot of time spent on just getting that to run well, to get the reporting done, to get the information filled out, to get the checks in when you get that. All of these are going to involve a division of time. So you have to think with the team that I have, the number of people that could be directly involved in this, how can we make a change in what we do in order to expand it, in order to find more possibilities? So what I want to share with you is this chart, which I hope that we're going to come back to this in a number of times, but it just kind of gives you an idea of the factors that you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about changing where your money comes from, particularly if you're used to relying on government funding. Government funding, as it says in the first column there, focuses on outputs. What have you done? How many people have you served? Have you kept in compliance with the way that the grant was written? Are you doing the things you said you were going to do? They value making sure that you are mitigating risk, that you are eligible for what's going, and they have a particular approval plan or approach that you work with. However, each of the different main categories of funding that you're going to be approaching, and we're going to talk about the following three, foundations, corporations, and individuals, have slightly different requirements for what you need to do. Foundations are focused on outcomes rather than outputs and the change that is made in the community, the learning in the community. Corporations are focused on elements of that in addition to getting their brand and the return on investment out to support their employees and customers. And individuals, you can reach emotionally and through personal values, a completely different focus than you would do with a government funding, with government grants. So we're going to talk about this and what this means in terms of what resources can help you as we go on. And it will become clear. We'll come back to this chart in a little bit to make sure that you get these questions answered. But the idea here is that if you are relying on government funding and you feel that it's being cut, it's going to be cut, it's already been cut, you may have to change the focus of how you're working in order to open up more sources of funding. Moving from compliance, moving from output documentation, counting numbers and widgets, to storytelling, to making sure that you understand how to communicate the impact of your program, which is something, if you've already gotten foundation funding, if you've already gotten individual gifts, you've told these stories and you've put this together. What we're going to do is make sure that you have the resources that will help you refine it even further. First bit of advice that we would give for all of you. And I'm going to share with you a few resources in just a second. And those of you who are submitting questions, we're also going to be responding to those questions. But the first thing is to update your case for support. And just to clarify the idea of a case for support for those of you who are not familiar, it's the argument about why you need and merit funding. It's the internal document, the basic document that you would use for any other kind of fundraising that you do. Why do you need and merit support? It's what you put into a letter that you would send to an individual. It's what you put into a grant proposal that you would send to a foundation. But what is important right now is for people to get the picture of what's going on. And the why now is really the most important, because we talk about, and we teach in a class, we have a class about measuring impact that goes through logic models. And we always get a question about what do you mean by environment when we're talking about a logic model? What's the environment? The environment is the world that we are working in right now. That is something that's beyond your control, but affects how your programs run and affects what you're able to do. So the why now element of this case for support that we're encouraging you to revisit and to draw up anew is thinking about what is the current environment. I'm sure that those of you during COVID suddenly had a why now moment where maybe you couldn't deliver your programs the way they had been always delivered, and that your season where you had people coming in person to attend all these different programs suddenly was out the window. It was a change. It was a change in how you are approaching what you're doing. It was a change in the needs that you had. So the case for support essentially lines out what is the need and impact of your organization, and the solution that you offer, the need that you respond to, and the solution that you offer to address that need. And it talks about what a gift, a support would unlock. What would this make happen? And so I'm going to share with you in just a second a little worksheet that you can do to help rethink maybe your case for support. It should incorporate some of the material that maybe you didn't have to incorporate as much with government sources. You're not required to put in anecdotal or story kind of elements, testimonials. Those are things that should be included when you're really revisioning your case for support, along with a call to action, call to individual donors, to the funders that you've already relied on and that you're now exploring from different sources in order to address this. So let me stop and start sharing a couple of those resources, and then we'll pause again for some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides here, and I'm going to instead share a couple of resources that are going to be helpful. And I want to apologize in advance for this because I have so many resources open on my desktop that at some point I'm going to show you the wrong one in the wrong order. Don't worry, we're going to get there at all of these different times. So thank you. But the first one I want to share with you is what's called a revenue risk audit. By the way, all of these resources, we're going to be sharing them in the chat for you to take a look at. They will all be sent to you with a link to a website, part of the Candid website, free access, no problems, where you can download them all in format. And they're in PDF format, but they're in completable PDF format so that you can use them. We don't want you to upload your stuff to our site. We want you to download it from the site so that you can add in your own information. This is a simple resource sheet. It's meant to help you think about your funding mix. And some of you, I think, in the survey, we saw that some of you don't know that sort of like how much is what you're doing weighted towards federal funding. How much of that is your total budget? How much comes from the different government sources that you have? And how much comes from other sources? What this helps you do is analyze not only the percentage of where the money comes from, but what's the predictability of it given the current situation? Foundation predictability can be, we've had good steady relationships with foundations. It might be higher. Sometimes it's medium, sometimes it's lower. Unrestricted or restricted funding, oftentimes foundation and corporation funding Definitely government funding is going to be restricted. And how much can we depend on this? What's our relationship with individual sources? How well has that worked for us? What you want to use this revenue risk audit to is to just get a good sense of, okay, what is our situation right now? What are we most at risk with? If we lose one or the other of these, what do we need to fill in because we don't have enough reliable sources, dependable sources of money coming in? It's meant to be that kind of worksheet that gives you that sense. We have a similar worksheet I'm going to share with you that has been used if you've ever taken our Intro to Fundraising Planning class. This is a redone version of this Assessing Your Fundraising Strategies worksheet. We mentioned in that list that we show you, where we're talking about diversify, all the different ways of thinking about fundraising. This is something where if you are starting from a situation where you're going to be losing a portion, significant, even not as crucial a portion of funding, you have to think about what could substitute for that. So this assessing worksheet helps you think about who do you already have and what are the chances of, for example, with individual funding, that you're going to be able to continue the sources, like you're going to be able to renew donors. What are the chances that you might be able to identify new donors or upgrade the donors that you have? And if you keep track of breaking down your budget in a way that you understand, here's where we get most of our funding. It's coming from individuals or from foundations or from corporate sources, different types of corporate sources. This sheet is meant to give you an idea of where the money comes from and how you rely on it. But it also gives you a sense of what are the strategies for changing how you do this. And it's pretty comprehensive, but it can be added to if there's something on here that you want to set up as a separate idea. It's a worksheet that will help you work within your own organization to come up with, okay, well, here, if we eliminate this, how can we divide up the strain that's going to put on our organization in a way that we're not relying too heavily on one source, but that is going to fill in the gaps as much as we can. I would like to say that it will fill in the gaps perfectly for everything, but if you're relying extremely heavily on government funding, that's not a one-step process. But it is a process that you have to go through if you're thinking for your organization, where do we already have connection and where makes good sense for us to go. The third resource in this part of the training is our case for support worksheet. And this is more of a just basic worksheet, follows along with the guidelines that we've already talked about in making a case for support, understanding the why now, defining the urgent issue or specific opportunity that you're in. This is a worksheet that you can use anytime, but it's particularly necessary before you start going and saying, well, we got to substitute, we got to find somebody to fill in that amount of funding. You want to have a clear sense of what's happening. You also want to make sure that you're clearly defining how you've done work in the past. Remember that no matter that you're losing funding, no matter that your funding is not as reliable, the most important thing to all of the people that you're going to be reaching out to is the need. What is the need that you respond to in the community, and who is benefiting from that? You have a track record. You're a new organization, even. You have a track record of people that have been involved. Talk about what you've been able to do, the solution that you offer to the need in the community. And think about what now a gift would do for you. If it's specific to the situation that you're in, make sure that you add that language in there. Make sure that you're addressing the specific why now to this. It's also a good place to collect proof and credibility. And proof of need is something that you are probably familiar with adding in, having statistics, having details on the number of people being affected by what you are addressing. But collecting information that will help tell your story in a more emotional way, in a more what you would call anecdotal way, if you were doing it as a governmental source, it's a way to bring in more potential sources of funding that don't rely just simply on documentation, that rely much more on the emotion and on the change, either reported statistically or reported through testimonials of what you do. So these worksheets, I hope, will get you started in this. And this is just the start. It's just the beginning stage of what we're going to share. So what I want to do is stop sharing, go back to the blank screen here, and just see if there are questions that have come in, Carla, that we can address in this first part of the program.
Sure. And also we might be getting into some of these more in detail as we move into
Sure.
specific funding sources down the road too. So feel free to push anything back that we'll talk about soon. But the question with the most upvotes now, does Candid have a pulse on how private foundations are changing to meet the needs of nonprofits running programs?
I mean, I think we're keeping an eye on it, but it is a work in progress. I don't know what you've been hearing, Dave, but from what I've been hearing is that like a lot of foundations seem like they may have been a little slow to start in making a formal response to this. Because they're not sure what the future holds. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if they themselves are going to be targeted for doing what they do. I don't know if you saw the news that's coming out today that the government's starting to go after private foundations
Excise.
tax-wise, and it's not ideal, but it's starting to seem like more and more foundations are beginning to step up. Like you may have seen the MacArthur Foundation, they amped up their giving from a 5% payout rate to I think like a 6.5%. Marguerite Casey Foundation, they I think are roughly like doubling their giving right now. And I don't know if you saw the big news from the Gates Foundation. Like for what it's worth, they've decided to spend down their assets over the next 20 years. And this means their giving for now is going to go up quite dramatically. So, I mean, get that money. But I think like the Council on Foundations surveyed their members recently. If I'm remembering right, I think like maybe a quarter of them said that they were going to increase their giving in some way or another, even if they haven't already, but they're like strategizing on it at least.
And
What
yeah,
have you
and
been Dave?
Asia just shared in the chat the Meet the Moment pledge from the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project, which is a good example of foundations working together. The law makes it very possible for foundations to work pretty independently and to not do what other foundations do, as long as they adhere to the legal elements of what they're doing. But there's definitely a motion among council on foundations, a number of different pledges, grant makers for effective organizations, the National Center for Family Philanthropy, getting together and encouraging certain movements, paying out more, giving multi-year grants, giving unrestricted grants. Does that mean your foundation that you really want to change is going to change? Hard to say, but there's definitely a movement out there.
Yeah, but I think like there has been hesitation on part of the foundations so far, just because like they're nervous too. I see John's comment in the chat here that like 6% payout rate feels like an Oliver Twist moment. I mean, to some extent, yeah. But I think one thing that I've heard is that funders are wondering like how long is this situation gonna last? And if we step up in a huge way right now and we spend out in a huge way right now, what happens a few years from now? What if the situation isn't better and the only difference is we've spent down our entire endowment and have nothing left? What do we do then? So I think like they're trying to proceed with caution, some of them at least, but I think they're working on it, and we don't know what they're going to do in the future, but I think
There
they're
is a
heavily
definite
strategizing.
awareness. There is a
Yeah, there's
definite
an
awareness.
awareness.
So, other questions, Carla, for right now?
Some I know we will touch on, especially as we get more into foundations. So some of the questions dealing with approaching funders, I'm going to hold off on those as they're great questions and a lot of
Sure.
people are interested, but we'll cover that soon. Going back, I know we had the pie chart earlier in the presentation showing different non-government funding sources. There was one
Yes.
question, can you give us stats or percentages related to funding or state or federal funding? Sorry, I guess they're asking for a pie chart of percentages. I'm not sure if we can necessarily offer that. I'm going to drop back into the chat the blog post that we shared earlier. I think that's really helpful in case anybody missed that.
Yeah, the charts are really good. There is a limitation on what the charts can show. I'll
Mhm.
say that when we bring charts out, we concentrate on grants rather than contracts because of the way that that's measured and the way that that's reported in the 990. And that's where we draw a lot of our information from at Candid is what's reported in the 990. Also, when it comes to government contracts, there's also the idea of money being given to the states as pass-through money that's going to come out as a state grant or a local grant,
Mm.
which makes it very difficult to track exactly like what the representation is. Is that money that you got from the state arts organization, their money or the government's money or what? It really depends on the state. And there are different elements. I know that when NEH and NEA changed their funding, that meant a different thing here in the state of Ohio because our Ohio Arts Council gets money and uses federal money differently than the Ohio Humanities Council. These are changes that are different in every different state. So we try to keep the best and most useful statistics, things that we can report on. We tend to put that in our Candid Insights and our blog posts and some of our data. Um, I don't think I can answer all the different ones, but I think Carla has put in the chat the specific blog posts that we've drawn a lot of our statistics from.
In addition, you might want to keep checking out the independent sector and the Urban Institute because they keep a lot of good data on this stuff as well.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe one more question before we take a short break.
One straightforward question. Somebody was asking how many people are participating today. So we do have about 750 actually on this webinar. We had about 1,500 people register. And on top of that, we had about 800 people who said that they weren't able to join the webinar, but wanted to receive the materials afterwards. So really strong turnout today.
And we should say that this is the first instance of this kind of training. We're probably going to be using the material from this training so many different ways and making it available in so many different ways. So, and taking the feedback that you give us and changing what we share. So keep in mind that this is not going to just be, this is the end here, and you have to be in attendance today to learn everything. This is the start of all the different kinds of things that we're doing. And we have a lovely webinar coming up next week that I'll talk to you about at the very end that you probably want to pay attention to. All right, why don't we take a 5-minute break? And we're going to come back and Tracy's going to begin to share some more information about foundation funding.
I see all of your comments that are showing up in the chat and the Q&A about how do you approach funders who don't take unsolicited proposals. We'll talk about it. I think we're going to start going into specific revenue streams that you might want to explore. We only are going to get to 3 of them today. There are more than 3 revenue streams, obviously, that you could be looking into, but you could be here for the rest of our lives otherwise. So we are going to start with foundations. So a poll before we kind of dig into it. Do you have experience getting grants from foundations? I think we have a poll in here. Pretty sure. Okay. Are you very experienced with it? Are you a little bit experienced with it? Have you tried and failed? Or is it something very new to you? Everybody, a moment to respond. Once we hit 2/3, we'll call it a day. Faster you answer this poll, faster we can move on with our lives. And maybe for those of you who've already responded, if you want to share out in the chat, if you've struggled to get foundation grants, what is one barrier to foundation funding that you face? Happy to see some input on all of that. In the meantime, I think we're almost at a quorum here. Last chance, going once, going twice. Okay, I think this is pretty good. All right, so a number of you are pretty experienced with foundation grants. If you have hot tips, feel free to share them in the chat throughout, help each other out. That's how we're going to get through this. Quite a number of you have a little bit of experience, gotten a few grants, but not tons and tons. A handful of you have tried and failed, and 10% of you have no experience with this whatsoever. And 8 of you are unsure. Okay. Thank you. This is helpful. So yeah, do you have barriers that you've faced to grant funding? What do we got here? Being a BIPOC institution, being a barrier. Have barriers. Many like to see other support for your program or project before they're comfortable funding you. Yes. Many recurring foundations are scaling back funding because they're getting additional requests, the relationship building, market saturation. All right, you got barriers is the issue here. Let's talk about, for those of you who don't really get much in the way of foundation grants, how can we change that? And for those of you who are getting a number of foundation grants, how can we sustain that? At the very least, sustain that. So also keeping in mind that based on Dave's slide a little earlier, showing like the breakdown of where nonprofit revenue tends to come from, like foundation funding, it is an important piece of someone's overall funding picture, but it's just one piece. And it tends to be a relatively modest piece. So compared to that 300 billion that comes from or came from the government, foundations give like roughly 100 billion annually. So they've been giving like a third of what the government has been giving. So to put this into context, if foundations alone were to make up for that gap in government money, foundations would have to increase their grant making by 282%. And that's a tall order. But they are going to be giving more. A lot of them at least are going to be giving more. How can we tap into that? How can we at least tap into that Gates Foundation money now that they're spending down all their assets? So overall, a quick look at the foundation proposal process, because it is a process. Like first, we're typically dealing with planning. Planning is important because, like, for one thing, so government money is slow money, but some streams are faster than others funding wise. And while government funding is slow, foundation funding can also be a little slow. Maybe not as slow as government funding, but it takes a while. You will generally be waiting months to hear back on whether you've gotten the grant or not. So a lot of this is about time management. Like you're unlikely to get a grant really fast, money in hand, next month. It's not generally going to work that way. But if you're planning out how are we going to make up this shortfall in the coming year, how much money do we want to have in hand this time next year, that is something to keep in mind when it comes to foundations. And planning is also thinking about what type of support are you looking for right now? Because funders don't do vague. Foundations, they're all about specific. They want to know, do you want a grant for program A or program B and why? So thinking through which of your programs needs this money the most, which of your programs is most suited to approaching a particular funder right now, or is what you really need right now general operating support. I think we're all needing some general operating support, but whatever it is, just being clear on what you're asking for money for. And then we have research, which is highly important. That's just finding the right fit between what you do and what a funder does. We'll go into that in a little depth in a moment. And of course, there's the writing. You got to sit down and write the thing, and keeping in mind the variety in formats. If we were doing this 30 years ago, we would be assuming you're writing paper grant proposals. That's not the case today. You're dealing usually most of the time with online grant applications, whether it's going to be like a free form narrative that you're submitting via email, or whether you're working through like an online grant portal and they have their questions and answers that little text boxes. Either way, with online grant proposals, a big issue is dealing with really strict word counts and character counts. If you're accustomed to those very, very long, onerous government grant applications, these are not quite like that. But they have their own challenges when they are so much more brief, and you have to take really complex ideas about what you do and how you do it and why you do it and boil them down to their utmost essence. So a lot of your time is spent in the editing here. But for the most part, right now, let's focus on researching to identify the right funders. How do you approach those funders once you found them? And when it's time to write the grant proposal, what do these funders want from you? Sound good? So when it comes to finding the right funders, the really nice thing about foundations as an income stream is that you can find them. They are relatively straightforward to research, which isn't always the case with every funding stream. If you're dealing with individual giving, it's a lot harder to research individual donors than it is to identify really quickly a foundation who is right for you. Like, we can use technology in our favor here. So specifically, a major resource that can help you out is the foundation directory. So the foundation directory is a database created by us, Candid, and it contains over 300,000 different funders. And you're able to do very quick, simple, intuitive searches to find out who is funding what and where. It is very easy to use. And we'll go into how you can get free access to it in a little bit. Emphasis on the word free. We're not trying to shake you down for all you got today. There are multiple avenues through which you can do this research for free. But you can find detailed profiles of private foundations, including family foundations, corporate foundations, corporate giving programs as well, grant-making public charities, community foundations, all kinds of things, including also a lot of detail about grant recipients, which I think is key. You can see who has been funding who over time, which is very helpful information, because if someone has been giving to an organization who is similar to you, that is a very good indication that they might be interested in having a conversation with you as well. So you want to use a tool like this to look up your peers in the space. If you run a food bank in a specific county in your state, maybe look up whoever the food bank is another county over, find out who's been funding them. There will probably be a good connection there that you can work with. And we update this thing all the time. It's very useful. So we'll talk about this again more in a little bit. This is not the only time you're going to see this slide, and we'll go into how you can get free access. But just know it's there for you. The research is pretty easy and straightforward to do. I don't know that we necessarily have enough time on our hands to show you how it works, but it is easy to use. We have other classes also where we'll show you how it works. But the basic idea when you are trying to research foundations, you want to ask yourself a few questions. Who is it that you serve with your programs? Who is the population that you serve? Where are they located? Are they very local? Are they in just your town or city? Are they within a metro area, within a specific county, statewide, national, international? You want to be clear on that as well. And what is it exactly that you do for them? And I think these are pretty simple questions to answer, but be clear on who you are, who you serve, and what you do for them and where. And by answering those 3 questions, you'll be able to come up with a list of funders who may or may not be a really good fit for you. And as you start looking through your options, you want to ask yourself some more questions to figure out who's a real prospect for me. You want to think through the funder's requirements. Do I meet them? My mission, my project's goal, is it a priority for a funder like this one? Also, how much money am I looking to ask for compared to how much money this funder tends to give out in a typical grant? Because there's a big difference between asking for 5,000 versus 50,000 versus 500,000. And some funders tend to give larger grants, others tend to give smaller grants, others are all over the place. So that's part of finding a fit as well. Does this funder support organizations who are similar to me? I think I talked about a little bit a moment ago. Look up your peers. Find out who, similar to you, has been getting grants and where from. And also, do I know anyone in common with this funder? When you find a funder, you want to look them up on LinkedIn, find who are their people, who's their leadership, who's their staff, and see, do I know anyone in common with them? Which is why it's helpful to be connected to like pretty much everyone you know professionally on LinkedIn. Like be connected with your whole team, your whole staff, your board, key donors, people you collaborate with. Honestly, I think there's a case to be made maybe for being connected to people you know personally on LinkedIn as well, because you never know who they're tied to in their professional lives. At the very least, like bring information on these funders to your board meetings and find out, do we have a connection here? Overall, when you're doing your research, while looking through all these questions, keep in mind that you're really trying to find a fit. You're trying to find a match of interests. You're trying to find a match of goals. You are trying to find a match of values. Thinking through you organizationally, what are the things you truly care about? What are the things that are near and dear to your organizational heart? And finding funders who care about those issues as well. So that it means you are going to be potentially working together towards a common goal. This is what it means to put together a mutually beneficial partnership. And it is ultimately a partnership between you and the funder, which is also why relationship building is so key, and maintaining a good relationship with a funder is so key. And like, I know that it often seems trite to think of this as a partnership. You're like, what? They have all the money. It's a power imbalance. How is this a true partnership? They have the money, I don't. But if you truly think about it, these foundations, it is their job to give out money. Foundations are heavily regulated by the IRS. They're required by law to give out at least 5% of their assets each year. If they don't do that, the IRS will come and shut them down. It is their job to give money to organizations who are aligned with their giving priorities. If you are aligned with their giving priorities, why shouldn't you ask them? And so they have the money to make a specific kind of social change happen. They don't have the on-the-ground expertise. You have the on-the-ground expertise to make social change happen. What you don't necessarily have is the money. You need each other. It is symbiotic. And so that's what it means to make a partnership here. So keep that in mind and make sure you're finding people who share your values, because that is going to make a much more productive partnership. When you find someone, how do you approach them? I know you want to know about the approach, developing the relationship, starting the relationship. So like I think we sort of danced around a slide or two ago, you don't have to know somebody at a foundation to get a grant, but it sure helps. So look everywhere you can, first of all, to find out if you know someone in common with this funder. So you have some ideas here on some of the places where you could look. Your board members, of course. To your board members, don't leave your board members behind. If you're struggling with these kind of things with your board members of like, oh, I can't ask my board member to introduce me to a funder. We have a couple of free webinars related to board issues this month. I think one of them is tomorrow, if I'm remembering correctly, and the other one is next week. Yeah, if you're having board trouble, come to our free webinars on boards. They're coming up. Talk to some of your most loyal donors. Talk to your volunteers. People don't ask their volunteers for help nearly enough. Like volunteers know people too. Talk to organizational partners, other groups who you collaborate with. Do they know someone there? And you can suss some of this out when you're doing your research in the foundation directory too. Like look up your collaborators and find out like who's been funding them and who they've been talking to. Talked about LinkedIn. Like I don't work for LinkedIn, but LinkedIn can help you at a time like this. And then best of all, absolute best of all, I know a lot of you, the majority of you, I think at least get some kind of foundation funding. Your current funders are the absolute best source of a referral to a new funder. Because like the world of foundations is relatively small. Funders often know each other. Funders trust each other. If you have a funder who already knows you and funds you and therefore likes you, and you talk to that funder about how you need to diversify and you need to reach out to some new potential funders, and they are willing to go out there and talk to another funder you're aligned with and say, hey, I have this organization I've been working with for the last couple of years, and they do really great work. And I think it would be worth your time to take a meeting with them. That right there is worth its weight in gold if you can get a funder to do that for you. And you know what? Funders also, like when it comes to the relationship, funders like it when there are occasions when you are talking to them without asking them for money. And this could be one of those occasions. They don't have to give you more money in this moment, but they can help pay it forward a little more by making a really helpful introduction to you to a new funder. So if you've got connections somewhere, use your connections. That being said, sometimes you don't have connections, and it's not the end of the world if you don't have connections. There are other things you can do, partially because the grant proposal is oftentimes not the very first point of contact that a funder is going to want from you. So in many cases, a funder is going to want an LOI from you beforehand, like a one-page mini proposal summing up your project or your organization in brief. They can read it real quickly, figure out whether or not you're a match for them. If they like what they see, they'll reach out to you and ask for more. But oftentimes it's also good if even before sending an LOI, if they know who you are, if there has been some evidence that you exist. So like if you can find some way to have contact with them before they receive anything formal in writing from you, that will help. So when you find funders that look really compelling to you and you think, oh, we're a match made in heaven, because in a lot of ways, researching funders, it's not that different from dating. You are looking to find a match of interests and values in the same possible way. It's also a lot like job seeking, where you kind of want to get to the heart of the matter, not just, oh, I do great work. This is like, here's my education and experience. So you should hire me, but also kind of emphasizing the fit. What is it about my education and experience that makes me the right fit for this role with this employer. You're doing something similar here with the funder. What is it about the great work that your organization does that's a really good fit for this funder right here and now? You want to emphasize that fit. Keep all of this in mind when you reach out. We're saying phone call here. You could do an email also if you wanted to like reach out and start the relationship that way. You could. And like it's a judgment call which way you go. But I think there is often merit to doing this old school with the phone, because in a phone call, a funder has the option to ask follow-up questions and tease out more information from you, relevant information from you in the moment, so that by the time the phone call is over, they have a better sense about whether you are or are not a really good fit. I know that we had a number of people asking about unsolicited, no unsolicited applications. What do I do with the funders who don't take unsolicited applications? And that's at least half of them, at least. I think it's the majority of foundations that do not take unsolicited applications. And there are reasons why they do it. The reasons can vary, but like one of the major reasons is not everybody is the Ford Foundation. Not everybody has tons and tons of staff that can process thousands of grant applications every year. They got to put some walls up to keep out the flood of applications they'd receive otherwise. But they're still giving. They're giving to somebody. Why shouldn't they be giving to you if you fit with their giving priorities? But just because they say no unsolicited applications, they didn't say no phone calls, did they? They didn't say no emails. So if you decide that you're going to make a phone call, like I have heard with my own ears from a sizable private foundation that doesn't take unsolicited proposals. I asked their program director, how do you find new grantees for your grant portfolio? And she said, a lot of them come through people who call on the phone. And then she said a lot of what I already told you just now of like, yeah, because like, then we can ask them questions in the moment. And by the time we hang up, at that point, sometimes the proposal's just a formality because we already know if they fit or not. So if you decide to reach out on the phone, use your phone call wisely. First of all, really make sure you've done your research and you know you're a good fit. Maybe script yourself a little bit, jot down some basic things you want to say, and plan to make it a dialogue, not a speech. Like, listen as much as you talk. It's a back and forth. You're talking to a live human being here. And jot down a couple of good questions that you want to ask them. Preferably questions that are not easily answerable on their website. And try to use your time wisely. Keep it brief. Don't keep them on the phone all day. And at that point, also know who you're talking to and why. Like maybe you'll get a program officer on the phone. Cool. But maybe you'll get an assistant on the phone. Maybe you'll get the receptionist. That's fine too. Assistants and receptionists, they are gatekeepers. And gatekeepers have the power to open doors for you when you are respectful to them. They have the power also to close doors on you if you are not respectful to them. And also, fast forward 5 years, the assistant might be the program officer by then, and they might remember you as the very rude person who called on the phone and was highly disrespectful. So be nice. In addition to this kind of stuff, phone calls and that sort of thing, show up places. Like if there are big events where funders are showing up, whether it's a conference, a panel discussion, what have you, find a way to be there. Like when you find funders that you're interested in, for instance, sign up for their newsletter, follow them on social media. That way you always know what's happening with them, what they're up to. And when you find out, oh, so-and-so is speaking on a panel over there, I'm going to conveniently show up and introduce myself. That's helpful. Check different like nonprofit resource centers. philanthropy groups like grant maker associations, things like that. See what kinds of events they are having. Go to those whenever you can. If they're restricted so that nonprofits can't go, talk to a funder of yours, an existing funder, and see if there's any way you can weasel your way in. Sometimes they're looking for speakers or things like that. You could be somebody's plus one. Whatever you can do to show up in the world is good, and also be easy to find. Like, I think Dave might cover our like candid profiles, seals of transparency, things like that. That's one way you can be visible. Pay attention to your website, pay attention to your social media, pay attention to how your staff shows up in the world. You gotta do all the things that you possibly can here. And again, if you've got current funders, have them make introductions for you. But they do give, even if they are not taking unsolicited proposals. So don't let opportunities go to waste necessarily. And don't lean only on RFPs, like requests for proposals. Less than half of 1% of foundations issue requests for proposals because they're not required to. They're nice when you can find them, but you're going to do better when you hunt down your own opportunities here.
Tracy, couple of
Yeah.
questions, or one thing that relates to what you said. Several people have noted that their federal funding was often for capital projects or capacity building, and rather than, or general operating support, as opposed to program support. So maybe you all, if you could address the difference between those two, and also people want to know how do you get that capital support that the federal government has now cut?
Yeah. So not to say that this is easy. We're not teaching you easy ways to do easy things. We're teaching you like, here's how you can try and do a hard thing. And capital campaigns, like they're hard. There's a large amount of money involved in that. But at the same time, foundations give capital support as well. If you're using the foundation directory, for instance, you can do a search specific for capital campaign or for building and renovation or for like your technology infrastructure, things like that. You can do capacity building grants. They absolutely exist. Like if you go into foundation directory and you start doing like playing around with the advanced search options, you go into the types of support area, there are amazing things that you can find there. So general operating support grants also, I think we're all looking for general operating support. You can do searches specifically for funders who say, yeah, we do like to give general operating support grants. We do give unrestricted funding. And like some funders just do it a lot. There are certain big funders where most of their grants are unrestricted. But even with the ones that don't do, like, they're not like shouting from the rooftops, we give general operating support. A lot of foundations will also give you that unrestricted money once they've gotten to know you. So, like, maybe you have a current funder who's been giving you project grants for a while. They already know you and trust you a bit. You might be in a decent position sometimes to have a conversation with them about whether they would consider a general operating support grant. So talk to funders who already know you from like project and program grants, and reach out to funders who do general operating support ones. And one thing I have heard, like I forgot to mention this during the last Q&A bit that we did, but of how funders are responding to this moment. A lot of the ones who even aren't at the point where they're like, oh, we're amping up our giving, a lot of them are at least trying to make things easier on grantees. They're trying to make their reporting requirements simpler, and they're becoming much more amenable to general operating support. Even if they did less of it in the past, they're getting increasingly willing to do more of it in the future. But all those specific categories of funding, capital, capacity building, general operating support, foundations do those too. Does that answer the question at all?
Yeah, and we have several that are about individual giving. I just want to note that the third part of the session will talk about individual giving.
Yeah, we will get to that. So anyway, a bit more on foundations. Happy to take more questions on foundations once we've gotten through everything. But like, what's the difference between dealing with foundation funders versus dealing with government funders? So as you can see here, you're moving from an atmosphere of outputs and big time compliance to outcomes and learning. What is the change that you have created? You are moving from risk mitigation and eligibility. You're moving towards ideas of innovation, alignment with the things they care about, and accountability. How carefully are you using this money? Are you a trustworthy organization? Do you have a track record of success? Foundations do care a lot about your track record. What have you done that's really good and full of impact in the past that can make them comfortable that you're probably going to do good things with their grant money in the future? And the way that you approach them, this is very, very relationship based. I think there's going to be a much more human element compared to what you may have been used to when dealing with government funders, and a different type of proposal process. I think it's a very different vibe that you're working with foundations. I think like they are going to be in some ways a little more flexible on how you can potentially use their money, which is not to say you can use it however you feel like. They have reporting requirements oftentimes too, but it might not be quite as punishing as what you're used to from the world of government. Like if you're used to like tracking outcomes in government, you are more than prepared for the kind of outcome tracking that you'll need to do with foundations. And yeah, they're much more relationship based, like personal relationship between you and your program officer, which also leads to a bit more loyalty. It's not quite so much, okay, the hard times are here, you're gone. You can have a conversation with your program officers. But I think people who are well experienced with federal funding, like, are in a pretty good position to have the skill set to pivot to grants. So federal funding is really, really, really competitive. So you know how to work in a highly competitive environment. Foundation funding, I think, may be less competitive than government funding, but right now, it's going to be getting more competitive now that there are going to be more people in the space asking more funders for more money right now. And if you're used to that level of competition, you're going to be okay. If you're accustomed to doing 100-page grant applications, then you're going to be sitting back on your laurels by comparison now, because foundation grant proposals are generally much, much, much shorter than that. They're very onerous, federal funders, on how you track your outcomes. And funders care about outcomes. It's not like they don't care about outcomes, but it's going to be to a much more manageable extent than what you may be used to. And you've already been laser focused on outcomes, which means like you already know how to handle this. And if anyone here is not as comfortable with outcomes, measuring outcomes, we also have a free class on that we do all the time. It's called Introduction to Measuring Your Impact. If you want to sit in on that one at some point, we walk you through how to build a logic model. And I think you can overall handle this. So a little bit on the LOI. So sometimes LOI stands for letter of intent, sometimes letter of inquiry, letter of interest. Like I mentioned before, this is pretty much 1 to 2 pages, your proposal in brief. Often as a hot tip, it's nice to have your full-length grant proposal already written in the background, so that if the funder reads your 1-page LOI and they like it and they say, send us a proposal, you already have something ready to send, so you don't have to panic at the last minute. So if you want a little bit of help, some resources to help you out on the LOI, we have a lot of samples on the Candid Learning website, we have sample grant proposals that you can download, but we also have at least a couple of sample LOIs, so you can get a sense of what do these things look like in real life. These are free to download, and they're very helpful. And also, like, I think grant writing, including LOI writing, is a skill that literally anyone can learn. It can be a little tedious, but it's not rocket science. Like, anyone can do this. But just because you can develop the skill to write, for instance, a good LOI, doesn't mean you always have the time. So if you're dealing with limited staff resources and limited time, and you've got too many irons in the fire, we also have another resource that we've been working on at Candid, which is an AI LOI writer. And that is also free to use. I can actually maybe show it to you real quick. I don't know if I'll have time to demo it, but it's neat. It looks like this. So basically what you do with this thing, it's free. Put in the name of your organization, put in the name of the funder that you want to approach, and from there, just say something about your project. What's your project for? Or if this is general operating support, write that. That's fine. You could just generate something just from that. I will say, if you have a seal of transparency on GuideStar, on Candid Profiles, you will get a better quality AI written LOI draft from that. So if you don't have a claimed Candid profile that's filled out, you might want to consider that. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But otherwise, in the meantime, you could put in information about your mission. You could put in anything about your past with this funder. You can answer a few other questions about the work that you're trying to do. And at that point, it will generate within like a minute or so an LOI. Don't send in that LOI. All this is going to do is create a rough draft for you. But like if you send it in as is, like the funder's going to know, oh, this has AI written all over it. What you'll need to do is take your draft and then take it back and edit the thing. You'll want to take out anything that looks inaccurate, any redundancies, any parts where it repeats itself, that kind of stuff. And probably inject a little life back into it. Because the thing that AI doesn't have is a soul. So it'll give you a nice, smoothly written document, but that doesn't mean that there's much heart behind it. So you have to like take your little syringe and inject the heart back into that draft, and then you may have something that you can turn into a funder. But the point here is to save you a lot of time, because time is a limited resource in our field. Try this thing. It is cool. Okay, when you are talking about what is the right kind of proposal to send to the right funder, what do these funders actually want from you? They want to see a compelling case for support. This is a persuasive piece of writing. It's quite different from talking to government funders because it's going to be more story-based than you're used to. These are going to be read by human beings, and human beings, they say that they are swayed by data and by logic, and to some extent that's true, but they are also swayed by stories. You want the head and the heart in equal measure. You can't have one without the other. So tell them a story, specifically a story with a clear, linear, and logical progression here. These here are the typical elements of a basic grant proposal. Oftentimes they'll want like a quickie little executive summary on top, which is not that different from your LOI. And then you got your narrative. Your narrative is the heart and soul of the grant proposal. It is a story. It is the story of change, because you created your nonprofit and its programs for a reason. To meet a need in the community. What is that need in the community that you exist to meet? This is the why do I exist question. And once you have posed the why do I exist question and said this is why we exist, to fill this gap in the community with these programs or services. It is a logical flow from the need for the program to exist to here is how we want to address the need. Here's our programming and how it works, the who, what, when, where, how, and why, and how much are we asking for? You're going to go through all of that, and then you're going to talk about outcomes. Like, has the program been effective? Do your programs get results? Are lives changed in a clear, measurable way? So it is a logical, linear story from beginning to end, from before the change happened to after the change happened. And you should embrace a little bit of storytelling along the way. Make it interesting, make it readable. So I think style is something that can be harder to adapt to if you're more in the habit of approaching government for funding. So I often say, like, if you have experience doing academic style writing, leave that behind. Leave it in the past. It will not serve you here. Because if you think about the style of academic writing, it's unreadable. It's impossible to understand what people are talking about when it's done in that kind of dense, obscure style, run-on sentences and all. I think the best kind of style for a grant proposal to a foundation, take inspiration from newspaper articles. Newspaper articles are clear as a bell, clear and direct, and they are written to be understood. You want to write to be understood. No jargon, no buzzwords. Keep the acronyms to a minimum. Clear as a bell, and make sure that this is written so that people can understand it regardless of whether they are an expert in your subject area or not, because probably multiple eyes will be on this document, first of all, and also, like, your program officer might be an expert in your subject area, or they might not be. You don't know. So you want to assume that they are not an expert and be able to explain something so that by the time they're finished, they actually understand how your area works, how your programs work, and they are persuaded they can see the connections between the issue that exists, how you are addressing it, and the results of your actions here. So that's what your narrative is going to be like. They're going to want a budget too, which is kind of a subject for another day. The budget is important, and a lot of funders look at it first. It needs to be clear, needs to make sense, needs to add up correctly. We have a whole free class just on the budget. Let's not talk further about it today because we only got 3 hours today. And then whatever other kind of documentation they want from you, like your incorporation letter, 990s, things like that, they'll tell you what they want. But keep in mind this story aspect from beginning to end. It's logical. Some kind of best practices for a proposal to a foundation. So this is a bit that, like, I personally always talk about. I myself think that there are two qualities that are essential to a really strong proposal to a funder. And that's that your proposal needs to radiate credibility and impact. They need to trust you. So a lot of this is about your track record of success in the past. What have you done previously that was successful, that had some kind of results in the community? And also, like, are you financially responsible? What other funding streams do you have? Are you hemorrhaging staff every 6 months, or are you retaining staff? Things like that. Are you trustworthy? Do they feel like if they give you $50,000, it will be used wisely? And of course, impact. They care so much about it. And you have experience with dealing with outcomes and impact. You're going to do that here too. Just remember, make sure talking about your impact contains both the head and the heart. You want those numbers, you want that data, but stories too. You want to have real stories of how your programs have made a difference. This I already think I talked about, that your narrative should tell a story with a logical linear progression from problem to solution, a story of change, and throughout emphasize that fit that we talked about during the research bit and the approach, the fit between what you care about and what the funder cares about, so that they understand that you're not trotting this same proposal around to every funder in town. This is just for them. It's special for them. There's a reason why you're approaching this funder and not some other funder. And this, I think I also already talked about. Aim for crystal clear language that anyone can understand. Don't get overly fancy here. Right to be understood. So, the current environment, how do we adapt all of this kind of stuff in our messaging to what's going on right now? Because, like, some of you sounded really optimistic at the beginning of the class. We're doing great. But some of you seemed like you might be sweating bullets. How does this come across in your grant proposal? Basically, what you want to convey to funders right now is the fact that your work is urgent. It serves a purpose and it needs to happen, or else people are going to suffer. The community will suffer without it. So, what are the most crucial pieces of your work where the show must go on? What impact do those crucial pieces of your work have on the community? How is the current situation right now affecting your work and the ability to have the impact on your community that you're accustomed to having? How much harm will be done if this work is not funded and cannot continue? You want to stress all of these things. And yes, you will get this slide deck, so you don't have to write as fast as you can. And along the way, you want to avoid desperation if that's at all possible. Like, even though in all of these, yeah, you have to talk about the current situation affecting your work, what's going to happen if the work is not funded, why is this so important? But you have to tread a fine line and avoid showing them the fact that you're sweating bullets. You can't be like, please, we need the funding now. The wolves are at our door. You never get to say that the wolves are at your door in the grant proposal, sadly. Very sad to say. But basically, like I think was discussed a tiny bit earlier, the nonprofit sector is hard. It's always been hard. In the best of times, it's hard. You've had challenges before, and you're still here. Emphasize that your organization has existed through challenges in the past, and you will continue to exist in the future. That's how you want to emphasize this. You are a survivor. You're going to get this work done one way or another. Question is, do they want to join you? All right, some more best practices. I swear I'm almost done here. You want to cultivate a long-term relationship with the funder. Talked about that a little bit. So whether someone introduces you or you call them on the phone, you send them a nice email, you show up at an event and you meet somebody, that's always nice. And keep talking to them over time. Like, remain top of mind for them. Like, write to them sometimes. If you see like a cool report or article you think they'd be interested in, you can send it their way. Like, they like to hear from people. And this kind of goes along with the idea that a grant, it's not a transaction. It's not press button, money comes out, you walk away. It's not like that. This is a real partnership. The funder wants to be involved. They want to work with you. They want to talk to you. They want to hear from you. They like it when you invite them to your events, even if they don't have the ability to show up. They appreciate the gesture. But it's not a transaction. It is a back and forth. You're working together towards common goals. And of course, along the way, meet your deadlines, send your grant reports on time, like prepare good questions you want to ask them, get feedback on things. If a program's not working so good, you're not hitting your outcomes, talk to your funder about it. Treat them as the partner that they are. They can help you out. And also, it's good to draft at least a baseline proposal, like a boilerplate generic grant proposal to nobody, and always keep that on hand. You're not going to send it in identical form to 10 different funders, but you're going to take that baseline proposal and adapt it and tailor it to different funding opportunities. Maybe like you're dealing with something at the intersection of like arts and education, for instance. Maybe one day you are approaching a funder who's really focused on education. You'll lean heavier on the education foot in that proposal. And then maybe the next day you're talking to a funder who's more of a straightforward arts funder. You lean heavier on the arts foot in that proposal. You've got to pivot, adapt, know your audience, and talk to them in ways that are going to kind of hit them where they live. So, resources. This we already talked about here. So the foundation directory is your friend at times like this. You're going to want to use it. If there is a US-based grant maker, we have it. I'm telling you, we have it. We have all the private foundations. We have the grant-making public charities. You'll even find like donor-advised fund vehicles in there. We have a lot that you can look through, and there's so much information. You can learn everything about a funder. You'll be able to even see in the profiles, when was that funder last in the news for something? Did they have a big initiative that made the news? That'll be there. Were they a co-author on a big research report recently? That will find its way into the database, and that'll give you something to talk about when you call the funder on the phone. You'll be like, I read your report that came out last month, and I found it very compelling. Let me tell you why. They will have their contact information on there so that when you are ready, you can make a move. There is so much good information that you can take advantage of in this thing, so please do it. So in terms of ways that you can do that research and find those funders for free, Candid Community is one of your options. Candid Community it's a network of over 1,800 different locations all over the place that provide free public access to Candid resources. Most of these places are public libraries, so pretty good chance you'll find yourself at a public library. It's also at some nonprofit resource centers, some community foundations, some academic libraries, but you can get completely free access to the foundation directory through Candid Community. I suggest you try it. But there is another way that you can also get free access. And Dave, I think I'm supposed to switch the slides back over to you at this point. Is that accurate? All right. But first, we got a poll for you, which is, are you familiar with your Candid profile? So I'll stop sharing while you're answering this poll. We've got just over half answer.
Thank you. I'm glad to see so many people are answering yes to this question.
Great.
And I think we'll end it in about, let's give it till we get 2/3 answered. So, and then we will go ahead and do this very quickly.
Creeping closer.
All right, let's go ahead and end the poll right now, and we'll share the results. You can see that about 2/3 of you are familiar with your Candid profile, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I do want you to know about this because this is something that foundations use to review information about you. Many foundations review this to understand what's going on behind the grant proposal that they're reviewing. They'll be using this. Also, we had some questions earlier about donor advised fund managers, which I will also address a little bit later. Donor advised funds use Candid profiles on guidestar.org in order to understand more about you, to decide which nonprofits are the key ones in different areas where they can give. This is information that's brought into our website, guidestar.org. The Candid profile is created out of IRS data, and then it's updated by you, your organizations. So if you've not done this before, we have a webinar coming up on Wednesday that will teach you about updating your profile. But if you've never gone on to guidestar.org, looked up your organization, I encourage you to do so. You can update your information very easily. It takes you step by step through what you need to do to get permission to do that, and then to get a bronze, silver, gold, and platinum seal of transparency. And these seals of transparency simply mean you're sharing more information about who you are to the people that used this tool the most. And those are funders, donor advised fund managers, people that want to give to your organization. The reason why it's also interesting to do this, related to what Tracy was just talking about, is that if you're a small nonprofit under $1 million in revenue, and you complete your seals of transparency, meaning you earn a bronze, a silver, and a gold seal, which you can learn how to do step by step, does not take very long to do that, you can get a coupon code for 1 year of free Foundation Directory Professional. It used to be Foundation Directory Essential. That has been changed to where you get the highest level subscription to Foundation Directory simply by completing that information. The other thing I want to tell you about that's very important, and if I'm going too fast, I apologize, but know that there is lots of information on guidestar.org to find out more about how to get your seals of transparency. There is a new special offer for small nonprofits impacted by federal funding cuts. You can help diversify your funding with a complimentary Foundation Directory Professional 1-month subscription. This is available for free to organizations with under 10 million in annual revenue, not 1 million, but 10 million, and that have lost any federal funding. All you need to do is earn a gold seal of transparency and send an email to our support@candid.org website, our email address, with documentation, like a denied grant, some sort of information that says what funding that you lost. And you can get a free 1-month subscription to Foundation Directory Professional. So it's wonderful to use. It's great to easy to use at all of our partners all across the country. But if you can get it free by updating your Candid profile on guidestar.org, that's a great way to get it. We're right at the hour. So, by the way, we did talk about the LOI writer. There is information about that if you go to candid.org labs. I'm going to go ahead and say, I think we should take some questions and take a little break right now. So I say, Carla, are there any questions that have come in that are related to foundation fundraising or things that we've already talked about?
Dave, I'm answering. Carla asked me to kind of
Okay, sure.
answer on some of these, but well, one question that's come in, if you could explain, there have been a couple of fiscally sponsored organizations that have wondered, about the seal. So I'll let you tell them about that.
Sure. Fiscally sponsored organizations cannot yet easily earn seals, though we are moving towards that. And actually, there are quite a few that are already on, already have seals on and Candid profiles. What you would need to do is check with your fiscal sponsor and see if they have partnered at all with Candid. And if not, can reach out to our support team and they can help you with that next step. It's not yet a one-step process, it's a couple of steps, but it is moving towards having more fiscally sponsored organizations. Lori or Carla, any other?
That's about it. Yeah, like you said, I know you're going to talk a lot about individual giving because we've got several questions more related to that. So this might be a good time for a break.
I think it's a good time for a break. I think we're going to take, it's right on the hour. Let's take 7 minutes. Can we do 7 minutes? Come back at 7
Yeah.
minutes after the hour. And then
And just one more thing, we're getting a few questions about qualifications for the seal. So me or Carla will drop the help link in the chat because you really need to talk to customer support about that, about what you can and can't include in your profile. They'll be more than happy to help.
But I want to talk to you just a little bit before I get into individual fundraising about the difference between foundation fundraising and corporate funding. Now, if you know, Corporations have their own foundations, and oftentimes they have a similar kind of approach that private foundations, family foundations would use. But there's a different element about corporate funding that affects how you can make connections to it. Basically, there's more possibilities. And we do teach this in our intro to corporate giving, but just as a quick review of this, funders who are working through a corporate funding model using foundations or their own direct corporate giving, you have to think not only about approaching them based on the missions that they support, but about how they are providing support to their employees and to customers, and getting the word out about their brand and getting something back for giving support to you. So we do talk about this a little bit in that class. We talk about the fact that you can get cash contributions from foundations, direct corporate giving, but also through corporate sponsorships and cause-related marketing, by which I mean associating yourself with the brand, either at something like a company having a nonprofit night where everybody who comes in on Tuesday to this restaurant gets funding, or sharing their particular logo with a particular nonprofit brand. So there was the best example is the Yoplait yogurt cups having Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation lids that were related. You're buying both things. You're supporting an organization and buying something at the same time. Many supermarkets now and other places will have giving right at the register. We just recently had an article about that published in our Insights. It's important to know that you are trying to connect with this funder and give them different ways that they can support you. If you can do something where their employees can give to you, maybe through a matching gift program or for non-cash contributions, such as having the employees volunteer with you, offer their pro bono services, have this company offer products or space or something else to you. It's important to think about all these logical reasons why the corporation is going to give. They're giving for tax deductions. They're giving to make sure that people think positively about them, and it advances their business objectives in a way to connect to the community, to connect to customers in the community and people in the community, to get more corporately visible, but also to be good corporate citizens. What I want to share with you are some things that you should think about when you are looking to begin to build corporate funding as a potential element of your fundraising. Certainly, you can use Foundation Directory to see some of the biggest corporate funders, and you can specifically focus on searching for corporate funders that offer funding in your region, which tends to be where they have locations or employees or customers coming from. But it's important to also make connections locally with the other places where you can find information on company giving. Because the other thing about company giving that makes it different from foundation giving is that it often happens on a very small scale. It often happens with companies that don't have a real formal giving program. It may come out of their community relations department or their marketing department. So it's important to know who are the biggest companies in your region, right near you, right located in your particular area. If you have a local business journal, oftentimes they list what are the biggest software companies and biggest lawyer offices and biggest health manufacturers in your area. That might be a great place for you to connect with. And you may not find them in Foundation Directory. You may have to identify them yourself. I recommend working with your local public library to identify these. Knowing who's sponsoring community events, knowing who has a presence in the community, who maybe is just moved in the community and wants to increase their support is a way to find potential corporate supporters. It's also good to know from your board, from your volunteers, who they may work with, who they may be connected to. Do they know somebody at a particular company? Do they have a contact at a particular company? There are many corporations that only give if there is some sort of individual connection to that company. So I have 3 bits of advice for getting started with corporate fundraising. And the first one is to start small. Identify a select number of companies. It can be 5, is a good workable number, with a local presence or shared values to you, and research their corporate social responsibility reports that they may put out, any other community relations information available through their website, anything that you can find in the news, in the social media that talk about their presence, talk about the potential of getting a gift, talk about their support for the region. And once you do that, put together a toolkit. And I'm going to share some resources in just a second that will help you understand that. Put together a toolkit that can help you understand what you can do for each other. Remember that that's a key part of any corporate connection is what are you providing for them? What audience are you connecting with them? What are you doing for their employees? And how much visibility do they get? Get a toolkit together that will help you when you put a pitch together to them. Many of these funders don't ask for a full-scale proposal or even something as simple as a letter of inquiry or an initial proposal. Oftentimes they're looking for a reason to make that connection, that it might be very brief presentation that you do, it might be something that you put in a letter and in different templates that reach out to the community relations or public relations department of that company. I'm going to stop sharing here and show you a couple of those resources. And Carla is already putting them in the chat for you. So I'm going to share, let me get to the right place for this. By the way, I'm going to share in just a second where these are all available on our website. But there is a sponsorship toolkit that we have put together that you can download that has a clear idea of how to describe yourself to a potential funder with clear information that's vital to a corporate funder, such as the individuals you reach out to, the number of email subscribers and social media followers you have. If you have a big event, the number of people that come to that, information about the demographics, who you are reaching, who you are connecting to, and then specific sponsorship guides, because you want to be able to give to a potential sponsor ideas of what a donation at a particular level will be able to do for them. It gives you some basic information on that, and it enables you to connect them. The other things that are available through Candid to help you out in this, for example, are resources that you can find through our Candid Learning section. And that is available through candid.org. If you go to our little Candid at a glance at the top of the screen and go to Candid Learning, you can link into our resources, and the resources within the knowledge base, which is right over here in the resources section, has a section on many different things related to corporate funding. And I just pulled up the cause-related marketing resource because I think it's particularly useful in understanding that process and understanding what are the best websites that can help you out in this entire process. I should also mention that in the resources section, we mentioned sample LOIs and sample documents. All of the resources that we are adding in for this particular class are available in the resources section, in the sample documents, under the other category. So if you go to the sample documents, everything that I've mentioned, the sponsorship toolkit, information about putting a pitch together, which is part of being ready to approach a particular corporate funder. There's a worksheet there that can help you work through what language that you're going to use for that. And then the additional resources that we've suggested and mentioned throughout this process. Everything is available here on learning.candid.org in the resources section under sample documents. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing here and go back into the presentation and see, are there any questions that are coming in right now that we should address before I move on? Carla or Lori?
Yeah, no, I was checking. There are several about corporate, such as about matching gifts and also, federal workforce programs where you donate from your paycheck and things. But they really are all covered in the intro to corporate giving. And I
Okay.
know, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we want to get to individuals. There was a lot of interest in that.
Well, let's do it. Let's go
Mhm.
back and share the slides and move on. And hopefully this will answer your specific questions. So we're moving into unlocking individual giving. And just to get a few definitions out of the way, for those of you who don't do much with individual giving, we're going to be talking about putting together individual giving as part of your fundraising program, all the different ways that you work. We're going to be focusing mainly on the kind of giving that you would do as annual giving, identifying new donors, reaching out to people regularly, seeking funds annually or recurring a couple times a year, several times a year, from different identified constituencies that you're working with, usually looking for unrestricted funds. The campaign is what you would do to approach these different organizations. The fundraising campaigns are the different plans that you use to reach out to each group of individuals that you're reaching out to. Major gifts, as I said, we're not really concentrating on this, but as it builds within your organization and you build a connection to different individuals, major givers become identified from everything that you're doing. Let's see to get a really clear idea of where people are in individual giving. I'm going to ask to share the poll that we have here. Do you have an individual giving program? Got about half the people involved here are doing this. My cat has decided to become involved while we're doing this, by the way. So if you hear little meows in the background or tufts of fur that come up, that's from her. We'll give it about another half a minute just to make sure that we get a clear picture of everything. The cat will also be on the recording, yes, if we can. All right, I think we're going to end the poll here. We've got about a little over 60% of you joining. And yes, about half of you have an individual giving program, and that's fantastic. Some of you are in the process of creating it. Some of you have not really reached out to begun to create one. And if you remember from the early statistical sheets, it is something that a lot of funders will expect that you are doing. And I guarantee you, when you talk to foundations and other sources of funding, there's always a question about board donations, individual donations. How do you get individual gifts? And the thing is that it can be, there is no one right way to do it. It is about making connections to the individuals that are in some way connected to your organization. Go back to this chart, you see that it's really about approaching them. And often it's an emotional appeal. You think of an appeal letter that tugs at your heartstrings and makes you feel like, I really want to give to this organization. But it's not really just about emotions. In fact, studies have shown that individual givers are just as interested in production and what the nonprofit does and how successful they are at what they're doing. It is connecting to their personal values. It's showing what you do, how you make things happen, and telling the story, making sure that those individuals are connected to you and see why they should, because they have shared values with you, they should be giving to you. Another thing that's key for working with individuals, in addition to telling your story as clearly and directly as possible to them, is appreciating them, reaching out to them and making sure they understand that they are connected to you. Some of the most disappointing information lately has been about the fact that ongoing giving from individuals has not been as reliable in the last few years. There's been some studies through AFP and other resources about that, about how it's difficult to keep people giving at the same level. And oftentimes that individual giving drops off. So I want to make sure we talk about all of those things as we get in here. I mentioned that most of the donors that you are going to have, they may not be giving you the majority of the larger gifts, but most of your donors are going to be occasional. They're going to be giving things at events or in like an occasion, a particular fundraising campaign. What you're trying to do is move every donor that you get up from the very basic level. And this is a famous chart that shows you kind of the movement that you want every donor to get, or as many as possible, from occasional donors and event participants to recurring and annual donors, to people that are going to give to you because they feel connected to you. You put forth something, you connect to people that they care about, you share their values, they get good return on investment from you because they see what their money is doing. Some of those people are going to move into the role of major donors and be able and capable of giving more than the basics. But we want to concentrate on making sure that you make connections to the individuals that you can. It's important to know who's out there. Who are the people that you are reaching out to? And how do they connect to you? It's sometimes amazing to me that one of the things that isn't thought about more is how do people get connected to you? It's not like everybody reads a letter that you send in the mail. That's not the only way that people can connect anymore. It's not the only way that certain groups of people connect most readily in order to make donations. So I'm going to share a couple of documents here just at first to help you get a good sense of individual possibilities and individual connections. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides just for a second and bring up these resources. And they are among the documents that are in the sample documents here. And one of them is understanding how you communicate with your donors, understanding a donor communication process. How often do you do these different things to reach out to individuals? And how do you personalize this? This kind of audit, this analysis of the messages that you do is great if you're currently doing it to different individual gifts or different groups to see what you're doing most often and what's working. It can give you a good sense of what stories you usually tell and how they're best communicated. But one of the other things that you really need to look at is understanding who all these personas are, who these donor personas might be. And one of the other handouts related to individual giving is a sample of the different personas that you might be reaching out to. Now, if you're very new to this, you may not be able to classify your donors and categorize them this way. But looking at the list of donors that you do create, or as you begin to create it, you start to see who are these different personas, the different people that are connected to you. And it's not 100% perfect. This is an example of the different personalities that might be engaged in your organization, motivated by different things. But one thing you could say is, well, we had people come into an event, and these were mainly people that were driven and interested by the specific location that we were at. Maybe these are people that are connected because they've given regularly, and maybe they've been connected to the organization for a long time. These are all different ways of categorizing donors. How would you do that for your own donors? As you identify the people that give, don't just treat them all as a big lump of, oh, where they're an individual donor, they must value the same things and be interested in the same way. Remember that some of them prefer different channels, different ways of getting information. Some of them have different abilities to give, different giving ranges. Some of them are motivated by totally different things related to connecting to your organization. Looking at those and analyzing, given that these are the people that are giving to us, how do we connect to them? How do we make an audit of how we connect to them? That's extremely important. The third resource that I'm sharing with you, this is a completed version of an analysis that we would do on the different donors that you go to. How do you reach out to them? How do you keep connected to them once you make the connections with them? These are all 3 resources that can help you out. I'm going to go back to the slides, and then we'll make sure by the way, we're going to make sure we have question time at the end here so that you can ask some of the final questions that you might have. But understanding your donor lists, understanding who does give to you, and understanding why and how. Anything you can do, it's worthwhile. And I've been teaching this to other groups and thinking about using maybe a slow time in the summer, maybe a time when you're not doing a lot of direct outreach, a time when you're kind of taking stock. It's a good way to analyze your donor lists and see what do you get from them. Can you look at them based on how much they give? Can you look at them based on where they come from? Can you look at them based on how you've communicated with them? Because that will give you a better picture of who's out there and who you can connect with in the future. Because the idea is you want to know, do we need to identify new individuals, new potential sources of funding? So that might mean reaching out to your circles of influence, people that are already connected to you, people that are larger givers that might have friends and that might have connectors, volunteers, board members, everyone that is connected to you in some way through the influence that you have in the community versus people that are just in the community that you might be able to engage with, people that you have served, people that come to events, people that are next door to you in the region with you. The third big category of potential sources of new individual donors is through donor advised funds. And we could do a whole class, and we have done a lot of different lessons specifically on connecting to donor advised funds. One thing that makes it difficult is that though the money comes from a foundation, it's not a foundation that you can write to and request grants from. Someplace like Fidelity or Vanguard or Schwab manage individual gifts, and they give through their foundation, but the money is coming from individuals in the background. What else can you do to get the word out to donor advised fund managers? I'll tell you that one way is to make sure that your Candid profile is updated on guidestar.org. That is definitely one way. But it's also looking at the individual gifts and see, is this a check that's actually come from Fidelity? Is there a way I can reach out, if not directly to the individual donor? Can I get a way to understand who out there is connected to Fidelity or Vanguard or Schwab or another donor advised fund manager? Can I ask that in our solicitation letters? Do you have a connection? Can I put that on our website? That increases the potential for donor advised fund giving. And as I mentioned, Fidelity, Vanguard, National Philanthropic Trust, these are all donor advised fund managers that use the Candid profiles to do their research and to understand who they might be soliciting funds from, or giving funds to, I should say. So my main message out of all of this is to revisit your case for support again. We talked about this at the very beginning. We went over the idea of it. Individuals, remember, you are connecting based on the values, you're connecting based on the stories that you were telling. Why now is the most important thing that you need to think about when you're working with your individuals. If you think that they are going to know that things are challenging for you or that you're losing funding without your telling them, you're probably wrong. They see a lot of things in the news. Everyone sees a lot of things in the news about this funding is cut or this might be done, but they don't know what happened to you. And they definitely don't know how that's going to affect the individuals that you serve. That's a story that you need to be able to tell right now. Why now? What's happening? We've lost 20% of our funding. This particular federal grant, this particular state grant has been cut. Here is who we are able to benefit. I think that when I saw just recently, a lot of library systems have made this kind of storytelling extremely clear. Because this particular funding would be cut, we are not able to offer. We will not be able to offer summer reading programs or materials for the blind or whatever it is that is specifically affected. What can a donation from an individual make happen? If people have already connected to you, that's a good indicator that they care about what you care about. And when people that they care about, that you're helping, are suddenly put in jeopardy in getting the things that you know and they know are essential, they need, the individuals that are donating need to know that. I suggest creating a test campaign, and I'm not going into the weeds with talking about how test campaigns work. I'll just say trying out a different way of communicating, a new message through a new format, going through Facebook as a fundraiser, going through sending it to the top donors in this particular list, sending an email describing this particular issue, and seeing what the return, the open rate of that email, or the number of people that have given you what you expected to get from that solicitation is a great way to test to see, are you able to tell the story in a more effective manner? It's something that you can't, restoring, if you start thinking about restoring what's been taken away, it can really get in the way of doing what you can do with that information, getting the story out. I was actually, while we were teaching this webinar, I got a text from someone who I know is a fundraiser and works with a number of organizations. And they said, oh, well, we just recently got $100,000 grant unexpectedly because we told this specific story. I'm not even making this up. This actually happened while I was listening to this, the part that I'm not talking about in this webinar. But the reason why that particular gift happened was that they were able to put a story together that showed what is going to happen if it's not kept up, if there's not. And the $100,000 does not replace whatever amount that they lost from the federal government, but it does add another possibility. It does keep certain things going on that were jeopardized. It's important also, in addition to talking about the new situation and communicating it as accurately as you can, it's important to stay connected to people who have given to you before. And maybe they gave this year for the first time. You just want to be able to keep in touch with them. Maybe they've given last year, but they haven't yet given this year. Maybe they gave a while back and still haven't given back. How do you stay connected to your individual donors? What kind of stewardship do you do that makes sure that they know what your current situation is? And I'm going to just ask people to throw something in the chat about that. What are Hester is sharing here in Oregon, private donors made up the 25,000 taken from the Playhouse in 3 hours. Now we're working statewide. That's a terrific story, Hester. Thank you so much. Think about newsletters. Leslie is using newsletters to make that connection. If you know that they're going to read your newsletter, if you have a feature, I know that there's a Instagram feed that I do never miss because the videos are always so interesting. If you know that lots of people are following that, that's a great opportunity to get the word out about something more than just a feel-good thing. Newsletters, personal holiday cards, visits, keeping your promises, exclusive donor events each month. This is a particularly good time to think, I haven't heard from them in a while. I'd really like to make a connection. Site visits, holiday cards, a board member who sends thank you notes handwritten to any donors from her church. These are all fantastic ways to use people that are connected to your organization to help that connection. These are all fantastic ideas, pictures and stories of those their money supported. Yes, nothing tells the story better than a picture of somebody who's received something that you made possible and that donor made possible. Similar products, individual and foundation thank yous, personal stories. you have all of this, and to just kind of be stunned by the current situation and not be able to make the best use of it and reach out to people and let them know how grateful you are and encourage them to continue. These are all fantastic ideas. And I encourage you to take a look and to think about what are ways that you could reach groups of people that you haven't been able to do that before. Free events, skill sharing. We have so many resources to share with you, and I know I might have like completely blown your mind with the different ones that we've shown throughout this particular program. We do have the donor stewardship plan. That's one of the things, the donor action plan. I do want to also share a couple of great resources that I'm afraid we might forget about if I don't share them now. And so the one I'm bringing up here, I told you about the donor stewardship strategy. That's one of these. We also have an overall resource that can help you with the next steps. This is a new resource just recently created and is in our knowledge base along with the other resources. It's called our AI-powered digital storytelling starter toolkit. Came out of events that we planned a few months ago. These are quick, easy to use guides that help you create more material using AI, not using AI as a substitute for you or to substitute for your stories, but using AI in order to make the best use of those stories. Some people don't like AI. I can't say that I don't have that feeling a lot of the time, but I believe in AI as an assistant the way that I believe in Google as an assistant. I don't trust everything that Google sends me the first time, but I do look to see if there's another way of looking at the material that I have. So I encourage you to take a look at it. You don't have to use it. Do look at the different sample resources, the documents that we have, specifically all these different templates that we've shared. And I think I'm just going to get to some of the final slides here, Tracy, if that's okay, and then we can see about some final questions.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this particular document, and I'm going to go back to our slides for the last hurrah here, the last movement through them. And see if you do have questions. I'm going to ask Carla and Lori and anybody else to ask those questions, but I am going to share the idea that prioritizing is going to help you not get as stressed. All those data, all those stats at the very beginning, we know are stressful. And that's why limiting your news exposure can help you, but also prioritizing ruthlessly when you're deciding to take action. Make sure that you don't try to do everything at once. Think of the low-hanging fruit. Think of the things that you can do easily, the quickest wins. It's vital to think about that. No, those quickest wins are not necessarily going to replace $80 million or $30 million. But what can they do to make sure that your programs continue? How can they make things better for you? So if you want to share in the chat one step that you're going to take in the next week, based on all the different things that we talked about, we'd love to see that as well.
Dave, yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna
some
get to it.
questions
Yeah, your
here.
last slide covered a lot. A lot of people were wondering, well, how do I do all this if I'm a one-person shop? What do I prioritize? In particular, several people asked about, individual giving, kind of wondering, is this a good time to prioritize that when there's so much uncertainty in the economy and, are individuals, going to be scaling back, which I know we can't exactly forecast, but
Uncertainty affects different people in different ways. Some people are uncertain, because of the economy. They say, well, I'm going to retrench and I'm not going to be giving as much. Other people say, I'm going to not give as widespread. I'm going to concentrate on the organizations that mean the most to me, that I mean the most to. And you might be, by communicating to them, making that easy for them to do. You see it with foundations. It's possible. I mean, the foundations just heard today that they might have a bigger excise tax to pay and they might have to cut their giving. But there are going to be some foundations that don't see that as something that they're going to concentrate on, they think that means this is an emergency situation and we need to give more. So you don't know until you reach out. You don't know until you make an effort. I would say that individual giving, adding on individual giving is probably the easiest, because I bet even if you don't have an individual giving program, you can think of 5, 10, 15 people who would give to you. You might be able to identify foundations, but if you're a brand new organization, it might take a little bit of time to get into the groove. Identifying 5 corporations, not the biggest national corporation you can think of, but somebody in your region. That's what you want to do. We think of this oftentimes as a bullseye, like a target. Who's as closest to the bullseye, closest to your organization that you maybe haven't reached out to recently or haven't thought about getting to? Those would be the ones I would go to.
And like individual giving, like it's not that it's easy right now, but it's one of the fastest turnaround times for types of income you could be looking for right now. Like grants take time, corporations take a bit of time, a lot of the other stuff takes a bit of time as well. But if you want to have one of those, like Dave was saying, easy, quick wins, if you land a couple of really great donations right away, it's money in the bank and it's good for morale and can help you build momentum for the asks
It's
that
a
you're
great
gonna make.
story. I just told you about that $100,000 gift this organization got. They're going to be using that to leverage more fundraising, because they're going to say people stood up and stepped up because we were in a crisis situation. You could help us continue that and be able to build on it. Not everybody can give $30 million, but you can build yourself closer to that by leveraging other gifts. I'm going to make a plug before I forget. For the Resilient Fundraising in Uncertain Times class next week, our colleague Yvonne is going to be gathering this group together to make sure that you're clear on some of that. And if you're looking for more encouragement and more clear ideas coming from other people in your situation, I think this is a great resource for you. It's another free.
It's also going to cover some of the streams of income that we didn't necessarily have time to go into as far. It'll go further into donor advised funds. It'll touch on earned income that we couldn't really cover today. And so it might expand your horizons on even more things that you could try.
Well, you all answered another question that had come up, which is there going to be more information on this? So I'm glad that you plugged the next week's webinar. We have been answering questions furiously in the background because we knew you had so much stuff to cover. So there were tons of questions. Just because I don't have one now doesn't mean there weren't a lot of questions. Anybody who has the Q&A panel open also can look under answered and see if, there's some more information there. But yeah, I don't have any new questions right now. Like I said, everyone just wanted to know where, they can get, more information on this topic. So
yeah, and absolutely, Asya has shared in the chat. If you are not getting the latest information on legislation, I really recommend the Council of Nonprofits Trends and Policy Issues section. And the link there is there in the chat at 346. So you can get that and have that. We're so grateful for you all to join today. We hope that you learned a lot. My cat is really angry at me for not talking to her the whole time here, but I'm so glad that you were here. We will make sure that we share resources that we've come up with. I would love to show the cat. I think she would knock over the table and the drink that I have here. But thank you so much all for joining. Please give us your feedback. If you thought it was really too long, if you thought Dave has a monotonous voice, tell us those things, but also tell us what you would like to see. That's even more important to us. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. And we look forward to seeing you again. Any last words, Tracy?
Any last words? I don't know. Good luck to everyone. This is a hard year, I think, for most of us. And also, like, be sure to lean on your fellow nonprofits too. I think one thing that we probably could have covered more if we had more time is collaboration is one of the things
Yes.
that can also get us through, whether it's an informal collaboration, or a full-blown merger. Like,
Mm.
you gotta explore your options if you want to keep doing the work that you do.
Can everybody see my cat? Okay. I'll see you all. Thank you so much.
With
Take care,
everybody.
everybody.